Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of... Okay, let's get it done.
This is Rogers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rogers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivered for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Frederick plays it in at the buzzer. That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the cockfather himself, Keith Allsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into the June 14th episode of Gamecock Pod Live. I am your host, Keith Allsep. This is episode number 1240 of Gamecock Pod Daily and Gamecock Pod Live. And in just a few minutes, we will be joined by my good friend Collyn Taylor from Gamecock Central. But first, go ahead and jump in the Nana's Porch chat box. Get your questions in for Collyn. Today's show and the chat box is brought to you by Nana's Porch. Nana's Porch is a full-service catering company serving the greater Charlotte, North Carolina area. Whether it's a wedding, a banquet, a corporate event, or a backyard bash with the whole hog barbecue, Nana's Porch has got you covered. Maybe you're getting ready to celebrate your Little League season or a church group or a women's group. You want to bring in a food truck or food trailer. Nana's Porch, top 3 in the Charlotte area for food trailers by a local newspaper poll. Go to nanasporch.com. That's NANASPORCH.com. Get in touch with my man Chris Payne. Support this Gamecock-owned and operated business. All right, to the headlines of the day. Today is a big day. Number 1, it is National Flag Day. Number 2, the SEC schedule for 2024 will be revealed tonight on the SEC network. We'll have more on that in just a second. And then today is National Bourbon Day. Go ahead and let us know what your go-to bourbon is. I'm not a big bourbon drinker, but when I do, it's either Crown Royal, which is kind of a blend. I like the Black Label Crown Royal, Maker's Mark, which is silky smooth, and Woodford. Those would be my top 3. All right. As I said, the SEC schedule will be revealed tonight. Breaking news earlier today. All 14 current members of the Southeastern Conference will play either Texas or Oklahoma. So they will get 7 and 7, and then they'll play each other probably for the 8th game. And so a lot of predictions on South Carolina's schedule. I'll ask Collyn what he says. Everybody's got South Carolina playing both Georgia and Alabama. I'm on the fence with it because one of the most respected UGA insiders, Roddy Nabolsi, for I think it's On 3 Rivals now, formerly formerly of Rivals, now on 3. He does not have Georgia playing South Carolina. And so my prediction is the Gamecocks will play on the road at Florida, at Kentucky, at Vanderbilt, and at Alabama. And they will host Tennessee, Oklahoma, Ole Miss, and either Missouri or Georgia. Hopefully Missouri. I think South Carolina's like Tennessee fans for the last several years. They would just as soon not play Alabama, right, until last year because they've been getting their brains beat in. Personally, I'm hoping South Georgia goes off the schedule for a couple of years. Beginning in 2024, we will see. All right. Yesterday, the Gamecocks offered a guy that I'm very high on after watching his film. He was in camp session number 2 of the Shane Beamer Summer Camp, which was last Friday, and that is Savannah Christian athlete David Busey. No relation to Gary Busey, okay? David's dad played at Syracuse. And this guy, he is 6'1.5", 200 pounds. He plays wide receiver, linebacker. Torian Gray worked him out. Clayton White came and looked at him. They like him as a safety or a nickel. I look at the film and I kind of see what DQ Smith is like as a safety and a nickel. And then I look at Jalen Kilgore as a two-way player. And I think he's kind of a cross between those two guys. I don't know that he has the electric speed of Jalen Kilgore, who I think is good enough that by midseason he may be starting over somebody else that you would currently project. But I really like Busey, just like I love Fred Johnson, who's a wide receiver and a linebacker. He measured 6'3.5", 225. He ran 4.54 in the 40, 4.2 flat in the shuttle, which is elite for a guy like that. 9 foot, 8 inch standing broad jump, which is an elite measurable. You turn on the film, you love him. And Busey's already set his visit for the 23rd. Johnson visited this past weekend. He is scheduled to commit either on Friday or Saturday. I think it's going to be the Gamecocks. All right. In other news, as I adjust my microphone here, well, that's a first. Earlier today, Ethan Petrie and Cole Messina were named to the National College Baseball Writers Association All-America team. Petrie was a first-team All-American. He is the 24th Gamecock to be named first-team All-American by the National College Baseball Writers Association, which is really a big deal. These are the guys that are nerds for college baseball. They know the sport. They know who the dudes are, okay? They know, all right? And so I think it is a beautiful thing that Petrie is first-team All-American, Cole Messina, second-team All-American. Both of those guys will be back. So we're going to take a deep dive with Collyn Taylor, kind of an autopsy or a major debrief on the Gamecock season, and then we will look ahead to the losses, the additions, who can help that they've already gotten the boat, maybe some names to look for and some needs for the transfer portal. We'll also talk men's basketball with Collyn, the upcoming trip. projecting the starting five, the rotation, now that the roster is complete, and we'll talk some 2024 recruiting. A pretty encouraging article on Cam Scott, one of the top players in the country and a guy that can really fill it up offensively, a 6'5", two-guard that can really shoot it, can really score from all three levels. We'll get Collyn's take on where the Gamecocks stand with him and with others. All right, Hale McGranahan from the Big Spur, who was our guest last weekend. Okay, his 5 most recent crystal ball picks. I'm going to give them to you. Caleb Harris, 6'1", 190, safety from Alabaster, Alabama, who visited over the weekend officially. This is a Jody Wright guy, just like David Busey is a Jody Wright guy. Jody Wright is quickly becoming one of the top recruiters on the staff. Daniel Hill is a Jody Wright guy. Okay, Michael Smith, a Jody Wright guy. So, Hale, let's say crystal ball for safety Caleb Harris. I probably don't like him as much as Busey. I don't like him as much as Jalewis Solomon, Malcolm Ziegler. Probably a toss-up. Maybe you like him better than Kaj Sanders, but you'd really like to get guys in New Jersey, but you'd really like to start getting guys out of Alabama as well, because Alabama recruits on a national level. And if you can beat Auburn on guys and get some of the guys that Bama does not take. I mean, we saw what Ron Cooper did with the Lindsays, with Captain Munnerlyn, with guys like that, Darian Stewart. Okay. You can get guys like that can be NFL players for you that are below the Alabama offer list and the Georgia offer list. So I think that is what you've got to do. Another guy I love that I think is probably a 4-star player, defensive tackle Nnamdi Abuoko, 6'4.5", 335 from South Garner High School. Got to watch for Tennessee and Georgia, though. Those visits Florida and Georgia. Those visits are upcoming. Fred Johnson, 6'3.5", 225, out of Norfolk, Virginia, Maury High School, the 7'5'7". I think in the next update, he will be a 4-star guy. He is going to be a national climber. This is another great camp evaluation. He could be this year's Nick Emanwari, in my judgment. David Busey, who will visit and could likely commit even before the visit. And Matthew Fuller, who, by the way, is not the third welcome home. I dropped a nugget yesterday on GamecockPod Daily about who that commitment is, but they have not announced, and so we're not going to publicly spoil it, but just a little subtle hint. And I'm sure tonight on the Garnet and Black Town Hall, we will also talk a little bit more about that. All right, Aaliyah Boston last night. Go have a night, young lady. She became the youngest player in WNBA history to have a 20 point, 10 rebound, 5 assist game while shooting over 75%. She had 23 points, 14 rebounds, 6 assists, 1 steal, 1 block shot, and shot was 11 for 14 from the field. That's almost 80%. And Indiana pounded the Washington Mystics, and she did that against former WNBA MVP and elite post player Elena Delle Donne. Okay. I'm telling you, Aaliyah Boston, I don't even know if Gamecock fans really appreciate her greatness because of how she was just crowded and surrounded by multiple players. In the WNBA, you can't camp out in the lane, you can't play zone, you can't sag. And so, man, she had a night. Dante Reno, he begins play today at the Elite 11. The top 20 quarterbacks in the country were invited there. I think Reno has a shot to really raise his stock and his ranking nationally. And he's just a stud. I'm just telling you. All right, women's basketball nugget. All of the members of the freshman class for Dawn Staley are in school. And one of the transfers, as Malaysia Fulwiley, Tessa Johnson, and now Sanaya Ja, are all on campus, as is 6'6" transfer Sakima Walker. Tahina Paupau, who will probably be in the starting lineup. I think she's the only one that is not on campus. Also, Gamecock football, the guys that had not enrolled previously, they are all on campus, and that includes Nicholas Harbor, the Big Tree, Tosin Babalade, Bakari Swain, Trevon Ball, and several other guys, including Elijah Caldwell, who you probably need to remember that name. All right, 6 Gamecocks were named to Phil Steele's All-American and All-SEC list. I'll give those to you in just a second. Headlined by Kai Kroger and Juice Wells. Kai Kroger and Juice Wells both on the All-America squad. Kroger with the second team, Wells a third team All-American. 3 Gamecocks, Tonka Hemingway, Marcellus Dial, and long snapper Hunter Rogers named to the third team All-SEC, while Xavier Leggett on the 4th team. Glaring omission, Spencer Rattler. All right, that's just a fact. All right, we will be back with Collyn Taylor right after this message on how you can get this podcast every single day and join us tonight on the Garnet and Black Town Hall with my special guest, J.C. Sherbert.
If you enjoy listening and watching the free Wednesday show, now live streaming on YouTube, and would love more Gamecock Pod daily, join our growing Gamecock family by becoming a monthly or annual subscriber. You'll be able to listen to the show every day of the week and listen to guests like J.C. Sherbert, Hale McGranahan, and John Whittle from thebigspur.com. Collyn Taylor and Mike Uva from Gamecock Central, Emily Adams from the Greenville News, Ben Portnoy, Michael Lanana, and Jeremiah Holloway from GoGamecocks.com, Michael W. Bratton, the host of That SEC podcast, and many, many more. As a VIP subscriber, you can join or listen to the weekly live Zoom call with up to 100 of your favorite Gamecocks and friends. After the show is an unrecorded overtime segment where the real scoop gets dropped and discussed. It's like going down to your local pub or sports bar and having a conversation with your Gamecock friends about last week's football game, men's and women's basketball games, and Gamecock Baseball. And of course, there's always recruiting to discuss. In addition to the weekly Zoom call, VIP subscribers get the most popular podcast, The Morning After, which is released every Sunday morning during football season, and more VIP perks are in the works. Follow Keith on Twitter at KAllset, or follow the show on Twitter at GamecockPod. Go to the top of the homepage and follow the link. If all else fails, go to patreon.com/GamecockPod Daily. Join now and get up to 3 months free off an annual VIP subscription. You will love it, guaranteed. Now, back to Gamecock Pod Live.
All right, let's welcome in our guy, the hardest working man at Gamecock Central, no doubt about it. The jack of all trades and the expert on all of them, not any of them, as the line usually goes. Collyn Taylor. Collyn, how you doing, my man?
I'm slowly learning what downtime feels like. I was not in Gainesville, but I got back Sunday night from a trip that I had planned before the season and kind of took a breath and went, okay, now I have what we like to call a regular 9 to 5. And it's not any less busy when you talk about, the portal and all that fun stuff. So it's pretty much been nonstop, but I was able to sneak out and go to dinner with my wife, catch a movie, and do some things that normal adults get to do during the regular times of the year.
Nice. I can't wait for the Flash. I'm going to see that tomorrow. So
yeah, we got to go see the new Spider-Man movie, which was fantastic. Highly recommended. Whoever
want to see that one as well, no doubt.
It was great.
All right, so Collyn, today's a big day. National Flag Day, number one. Number two, the SEC schedule for 2024 will be revealed, but it's also National Bourbon Day. And so what is your go-to bourbon? If you're a bourbon drinker, maybe you're not.
Oh, I love a good bourbon. I call it apple juice, so we can avoid the censors and all that stuff.
Bourbonade?
Yes. Elijah Craig makes a very good apple juice. That's what my parents always get me for like birthdays and stuff. And I recently got my second ever bottle of Buffalo Trace, which is just fantastic. So my brother came through very clutch to pull that for us. And so I always like a good Four Roses, a good Elijah Craig, and Buffalo Trace are kind of the go-tos for me. If anything's going to catch my eye, those are one of them.
All right, so kind of like Lieutenant Colonel Frank Slade, Mr. John Daniels is kind of preferred. Well, when you know him as well as I do.
Yep. Trust me.
Don't call him Jack. You call him John. Look, Crown Royal has been my go-to. I know it's kind of a blend, but it is a whiskey, a bourbon blend. Maker's Mark is silky smooth. And then Woodford. So I'm not really a huge bourbon drinker. Mostly for me to get down to 190 pounds, I've had to eliminate that and just go to about 3 Corona premieres per week, usually after a Saturday on the diamond or on a college football Saturday. So
yeah, I don't blame you one bit.
All right, so what's your prediction for the Gamecocks 2024 football schedule? All right, so let's play keep or go off of the current schedule. Texas A&M.
I say that goes.
Agreed. Georgia.
I'm going to say that stays. I'm going to protect that one.
Damn it.
Gut says stays. The SEC is going to keep that one for the most part.
All right, so I kind of figured they would. And so Peter Burns tweeted out earlier today, all 14 current members will either play Oklahoma or Texas in 2024. So Sooners or Longhorns for the Gamecocks?
The storylines are better for Oklahoma, right? You got to feel like with Oklahoma, that's the one that it would make sense for that to be the one with Shane Beamer's connection there. Obviously, you wouldn't anticipate Spencer Rattler being back, but obviously the Rattler connection. And then Brent Venables, if he's still the head coach there, which you never know, but obviously heavy ties to this state from his time at Clemson. The storylines just write themselves, and I could see them doing either at Oklahoma or coming to South Carolina. Either one, the storylines still play fairly heavily as you look towards it. So that would be my educated guess if you're going to fill out the new member that South Carolina gets to play.
All right, so here's my predictions: is at Florida, at Kentucky, at Vanderbilt, and at Alabama.
I could see it.
Home games with Oklahoma, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and then I'm hoping Missouri, not Georgia, but I think it will be one of those two. The reason I hesitate, one of the UGA insiders I respect the most, former guest on the podcast way back in the day, Roddy Nabalsi at UGAsports.com, he put out his prediction for Georgia's schedule, and he did not include the Gamecocks. And so I'm kind of hoping, because that guy, he is a true insider, I'm kind of hoping he's right. I think a lot of Gamecocks are hoping he's right. But then again, 2024 could be like 2019.
Yeah. Well, and let's be honest here. When has South Carolina ever caught a break in scheduling for a lot of different reasons?
How about never?
When you talk about, congratulations, your SEC West opponent's Arkansas, permanent, and then that's when the Ryan Mallett, Darren McFadden, Felix Joneses, Peyton Hillis's of the world, then they go off the schedule, and then all of a sudden it's like, congratulations, you get Texas A&M. So has there ever been a schedule that South Carolina likes? Probably not, but you hope if you're South Carolina, you avoid the Alabama and Georgia approach to it, and you can just get one or the other, given that those have been the big boys, for lack of a better term, in the SEC the last 2 or 3 or 5 years.
No doubt. All right, so I'm just going to encourage all our folks who are watching live, jump in the Nana's Porch chat box, leave your questions for Collyn or for me. Probably for Collyn, since he's way smarter than I am and way younger. So, and he's about the same height as me, maybe even a little taller. We shared some barbecue a couple of years ago when you came out for the unfortunate sweeping by the Texas Longhorns, who had a very unfortunate conclusion to their season in the Supers. And so, Collyn, big picture, the CWS field is set, and man, it's just like I predicted. The winner of South Carolina, Florida, they are sitting pretty on that side of the bracket, with Virginia, Oral Roberts, and TCU only one other host of a Super. TCU, well, I think they did host it, Indiana State, but Indiana State was the seed, right?
Yeah, Virginia and Florida are the only 2 top 16 seeds on that side of the bracket.
Yeah. The other side, though, is kind of a murderer's row, right? Wake Forest, who a lot of people laughed at being ranked number 1 earlier in the season. And, after the Gamecocks swept Florida, a lot of people were saying, hey, the Gamecocks ought to be number 1, right? Wake, though, what they've done has been impressive. They have sustained greatness all season long. Tip of the cap to them. Then you got Stanford, who, yes, they play a boring style of baseball, but all those dudes is win. All they do is win, right?
Yeah.
And then you got LSU and Tennessee. And I will not be a bit surprised if it's not LSU and Florida for the national championship.
Yeah, and I was talking to, I forget who I was talking to about it today, but it's about as wide open a field as you can imagine. And I don't remember that being the case the last couple of years. Normally you go into it saying, no, these are the 2 or 3 teams that, are probably going to win it all. If I told you Florida won it, you'd believe me. If I told you LSU won it, you'd believe me. If I told you Virginia won it, you'd believe me. Same with Wake, same with Tennessee. If Tennessee's clicking, I mean, there are, you look at it, 5 of the 8 teams really have a not so insane path, a navigable path towards a College World Series title. And, LSU's figured out their bullpen. Virginia is just they're a horse right now. They're just a machine. Wake Forest has the pitching to win it all. They're an elite pitching staff, and they play in like the most hitter-friendly ballpark in the country. So you're talking about 5 or 6 just elite teams, and you could tell me that there's a certain number that can win it, and I would believe you because there's such a high level of talent coming in there, and I can't wait. It's going to be a really, really fun tournament because there's just so many good teams and it's so wide open, and those first couple of days of pitching matchups are going to be electric out there in Omaha.
No doubt about it. All right, so let's talk about the one team that will not be in Omaha yet again, and that is the Gamecocks. Kind of a roller coaster season, Collyn. You get off to the great start, I think 16-1 in the non-con. Then you come out of the gate just like stormtroopers, mowing down people, sweeping Georgia, Missouri, winning 2 out of 3 at Mississippi State. You split with LSU. Yes, you did lose 2 of 3 at Vandy, but you won the first one and you clobbered their best pitcher, right? And then you sweep Florida and you're 33-6, 13-4. You beat Clemson 2 out of 3. And you are riding high. And then the injuries, I think they just could not sustain it with all the injuries. Noah Hall being out, not getting much from Will Sanders, particularly outside of that Florida start. I thought the Georgia start was pretty good. And then, McGillis, Wimmer, other guys are out with injuries. And you finish the season by going 3-9 in your Final 4 SEC series. You drop 2 of 3 non-conference games. You go to the SEC tournament, you finally get a win, and then unceremoniously you are dumped by losing 2 straight, including just a non-competitive game against Texas A&M. And they were throwing a guy that had a 6+ ERA and was not even, he was a true freshman who had a cursory role at best in the bullpen. But then you get everybody back, you get healthy, you catch fire in the regional. They scored 41 runs in 3 games.
After scoring 33 runs combined over their last 10 before the NCAA tournament.
Yeah. Granted, Central Connecticut State was a great draw as a 4, and then we found out the Campbell Camels were a very favorable draw as a 2 seed. Gamecocks just boat raced them 16-7. Then you go to Florida, Will McGillis, bang, home run. You have the lead. Braylon Wimmer reaches on an error. The umpire calls obstruction. He trots to second. They throw it. They tag him out. Once that umpire, which I am an umpire, once you point and call obstruction, it's obstruction. He is awarded second base. by rule.
Mm-hmm.
They totally blow that call. I don't know what the home plate umpire had to drink. Maybe he had vertigo. Maybe he took too much Valium. I don't know. The inning, Florida scores the 2 runs to take the lead. They strike a guy out on a middle belt-high fastball right down Peachtree, right down Main Street, and the guy just chokes on it. One of 18 missed called strikes for the Gamecock pitching staff. You go down 5-3. McGillis hits another home run. I mean, my God, after this guy, what he did in the postseason, I think his loss was greatly undervalued. But you're going to lose 5-4, and then, I mean, tip of the hat to Florida's pitching staff. You get 3 singles over 9 innings, and your season's over.
Yeah. And Florida was just, I mean, Mark Kingston talked about it going in, where he's like, it's going to come down to the team that makes the big hit when you get the big hit moment. And South Carolina had a chance in that game 1 to really bust things open, and then they had Sproat on the ropes, and all of a sudden Cole Messina chops at a ball at the letters and grounds right back to the pitcher, and it's a 1-2-3 double play. And those are the kind of pitches an Omaha team makes. Brandon Sproat is an Omaha caliber pitcher. That's the kind of pitch he makes. You swing at that and they get out of a huge inning. And, you know, South Carolina was not situationally good in that series. Really struggled with runners on and runners in scoring position, whereas Florida was great. I mean, not with runners in scoring position, but they got the big hit when they needed the big hit. And you saw that. And clearly that first game, the obstruction call, you don't ever know what happens in that one, where South Carolina probably at least gets 1 run in that inning with the runner at second and no one out.
All right, so let's discuss that, okay?
Yeah.
Because Wimmer should have been on second with no outs. All right, Ethan Petrie hits a line drive single. Okay, so that is at minimum first and third, no outs. Maybe it's a run in, and then the batter after Petrie walks. So you either have bases loaded, nobody out, or first and second, nobody out with a run in.
With LeCroy, Casas, Braswell, those guys.
And momentum.
Yeah.
Right, like a lot more momentum at that. I mean, you never know what happens. Maybe it is still a 1, 2, 3, a 1, 4-3 double play or whatever it was, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's a sac fly. Maybe, I mean, you just don't know because the pressure is different. The scenario is different. The plate approach is probably different, and so is the pitching approach.
Yeah.
And I thought that was South Carolina's chance, was to steal that first game, and then all the pressure is on the Gators. And we have seen it time after time after time of O'Sullivan teams. When they get down, I mean, granted, they rallied to win their regional after they lost to Texas Tech, which clearly was out of pitching. That was not the case with the Gamecocks. You're up 1-0, and then maybe you don't have to wait as long, right, on day 2. But you can also have the luxury of saying, hey, we're up. All right, this guy doesn't look good. We can save guys for the, if necessary, game 3. It's completely different. And I'm not blaming it solely on the umpires, but I thought the regional and super regionals really exposed a major issue with umpiring because, man, it's not that hard to call a ball that's middle at the belt a strike, and we saw it time after time after time, and we saw balls all the way almost off of the white in the other batter's box outside called strikes consistently.
Yeah, and that's a huge issue, not just when you focus on South Carolina, where it was magnified because we were all watching it. It's been an issue in college baseball, period. the last couple years, and you saw it in full force the last 2 weeks, and it's something that needs to get cleaned up because now we have data. Now we have TrackMan data and the analytics to say, okay, well, he gets X percent correct. He gets this number wrong. This, you see it in the MLB with, this many runs favoring this team based on the calls that were made, missed calls in big spots that cost teams chances. I mean, you see all of it. And now we're able to hold umpires, maybe not publicly because we're not privy to all of that data, but privately able to hold umpires to a little bit more of a higher standard. Now, you hope, after seeing what happened the last 2 weekends, and it was huge. You saw South Carolina mentally. I mean, it was in their heads. They were swinging at stuff that was just junk away, and I mean, Sproat's breaking ball is really, really good, and Waldrop's splitter is just insane how good it is. But they chased a lot more than they did against Florida in that first series in Columbia, and maybe that was just the pressure of the Super. Maybe that was the umpiring to go along with it. But you saw them chase a little bit more than you're used to seeing a South Carolina team chase for a lot of different reasons, probably.
I mean, I agree. I mean, that's what hitters do.
Yeah.
You have to adjust to what the umpire is calling. And when he's calling a pitch well outside, off the black, not even on the river, in between the space in between the outside part of the plate and the other batter's box, but all the way on the white, you've got to put your toes up on you got to basically almost be on top of the plate to be able to get to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and you saw it affected them maybe less. I mean, Waldrop's done that to everybody this back half of the season after the South Carolina game. But you saw that a lot at the tail end of game one, where they chased and they weren't pretty looking swings at times. And Sproat settled in, that helped. And then you faced a Cade Fisher who's coming into his own, and Neely. But it's not like you were facing bad pitching, but this is an offense that had shown the ability to mash and do it against Sproat early. And just it got into their heads maybe a little bit when you talk about having to deal with some of the umpiring, and then they were pressing. I feel like you could tell at the end there because they tried to get some of that momentum back, and it just didn't work as well as it probably could have.
All right, so let's do an autopsy on the season. Obviously, the injuries played a role. Obviously, South Carolina's going to lose a lot of contributors off of this team. I mean, you have to say, when you make it to the Supers, and I mean, you could have very easily won that first game. I mean, regardless, man, you started 33-6 and 13-4 in the SEC. You were ranked as high as number 3. Injuries and just natural attrition. But Collyn, I think before the season, if somebody would have said, hey, you're only going to have Noah Hall for 2 SEC starts, Will Sanders is going to give you almost next to nothing outside of Florida. You're going to be without Wimmer. You're going to be without McGillis. You're going to be without other key guys. I think nobody would have bet on the Gamecocks being in a super regional.
Yeah, 30,000. Yes, you can take issue with a lot of the stuff. And if you're judging this season on the entire tenure, there's a right to be frustrated just because some of the same issues pop up. I get it. But when you take, especially in a vacuum, coming off your first losing season, quite literally this century, I don't think there's anything other than this was a good season. Not a great season because you didn't make it to Omaha, which is what this program is evaluated on, but a good season, a step very much in the right direction. And it felt a lot more like what South Carolina baseball is and should be this year, more so than in years past. And you're right. When you talk, it's always, whenever you have a season that's a since season is what I like to call them, that's usually the signs of a good year. Their first 40-win season since 2016. The first time they were a top 16 seed since 2016. First Super since 2018. And that's 5 years since your last Super. That's 5 years and 4 tournaments. That's 7 years and 6 tournaments since your last top 16 seed and 40-win season. So a good year, a step in the right direction. And when you factor in the fact that, like you said, if I gave you a list and I gave you a piece of paper and said, I want you to write down 6 dudes that absolutely cannot miss extended time this year, and you wrote them down, I guarantee 5 of the 6, maybe 6 of the 6 were on that list that missed extended time this year. Noah Hall, Will Sanders, Will McGillis, Braylon Wimmer, 4 easy ones right there. Talmadge LeCroy missed, a week and a half, 2 weeks, and you're dealing with that. And, if I told you early in the season, hey, Cole Messina's going to be playing third base for you guys this year, I think South Carolina fans' eyes would have kind of widened a little bit just with that. But when you factor all of that in there, I don't think you can call it anything other than a good season. Not a great, not a special, but a good season and progress to get South Carolina back to what it is and what it should be as you move forward into 2024.
Yeah, I agree. No doubt about it. So, obviously, no more Noah Hall, no more Will Sanders, probably no more Jack Mahoney, Michael Braswell in the portal, Braylon Wimmer gone, some other guys gone. But 2 guys who were named to the College Baseball Writers Association All-America team, Ethan Petrie and Funky Cole Messina, are back, as well as some nice young arms. As we look ahead to next year, is Mark Kingston now over the hump? Long term, can he sustain success and be the guy? And how much of a factor can Monty Lee be? And to me, he's really critical, I think, because Kingston had 0 guys on his staff with any recruiting chops in the Carolinas, particularly in state. And a lot of guys that were going to South Carolina wound up at Clemson, at Mississippi State, and other places because, they kind of ignored the state of South Carolina and just recruited where they knew to recruit. But to me, if you can keep Monty Lee on your staff for 2-3 years coming up, it could really bring a resurgence of the greatness of South Carolina baseball because of the guys he can just flat out go and get.
Yeah, and easier said than done, keeping Monty on your staff. He's going to be up for head coaching opportunities.
No doubt.
That's not a shock. I do think Monty wants to be a head coach again someday. And, D1 Baseball linked both him and Justin Parker to the Cincinnati job last night. So the assistants, for as much grief as you can give Mark Kingston about a ton of different things, what I will say is he does hire, for the most part, fairly good assistants. He puts together a pretty good staff. When you talk about Mike Current, Trip Couch is at Arizona now, but Skylar Mead's a head coach. Monty Lee was a former head coach, obviously going to have it again. Justin Parker is going to have head coaching looks. He's hired, and Billy Mole, dating back to his time at South Florida, is now has been the Bulls head coach for a while and took him to a super. So you got to keep Monty on staff, and I will say Chad Kaye too. A lot of the success this year, you can tie a lot back to Chad Kaye and the foundation he laid last year and the players they helped land out of the portal, because Monty did not recruit any of these guys out of the portal. He got on campus and they were here. So certainly you would like to keep Monty Lee on staff. You got to keep him from taking head coaching opportunities. But I agree that there is a really, really good young core that Monty Lee did a really good job with this year. And if you're South Carolina, if I told you you're returning a freshman All-American, you're returning an All-SEC catcher, you're returning someone that raised his batting average 50 points from last season and his OPS over 200 points from last season, and Talmadge LeCroy, I think he's going to keep getting better. Gavin Costas more than likely going to return, obviously up and down, but the flashes were there. And then you factor in a Will Tippett, who, if he continues to develop, has a bright future. And you're bringing in some key portal pieces. This is an offense that has a chance to maintain, if not get a little bit better, if you're South Carolina. I mean, there are holes that need to get filled, shortstop being the most glaring one. But there are pieces there. You'd like to add some more depth, but when you talk about the pieces they're bringing in, when you talk about what they already have on the roster, you like where this offense stands. And if you're South Carolina, keeping Monty Lee is a big thing that you'd like to do. But if not, if you have to hire a recruiting coordinator and hitting coach, there's a lot to sell at South Carolina when it comes to working with the guys you're working with, and what you have at your disposal in the cupboard you're inheriting compared to what Monty Lee and Chad Kaye inherited.
No doubt. So, I mean, I definitely think, Eli Jones, Chris Veach, I think those guys are probably going to be two of your weekend rotation. Who do you think, are candidates to be the others in that? And obviously, Chris Veach is your only left-handed pitcher.
Becker's
I'm sorry, Matthew Becker.
Yeah.
I knew I was blowing that.
Yeah.
Becker, not
Yeah.
Veach, but Becker and Eli Jones as your starters. Who else do you think goes in there?
I mean, it's Roman Kimball, and that's about it right now. And I think that they're going into the portal. They need to really fortify that bullpen and that pitching staff, because it's just not – you're losing so much from it. And when you look at the 2023 recruiting class, there's not a ton of guys that can step in right away and fill innings the way Jack Mahoney or Will Sanders did, Brett Carey did as freshmen. It's just not there on paper right now. So you'll see the portal, but on staff right now, man, Roman Kimball has a chance to be really, really good. We were talking about that, during the fall when you're watching Roman Campbell, and it was like, well, what happens if, if he continues to pitch like that, who are you taking out of the rotation kind of talk? Is it going to be Jack to the bullpen? Is it going to be Hall back to a Swiss Army knife roll? He was that good. And so he's kind of tailor-made to be a Friday night arm in this league. And, you could go, if I'm projecting right now, I'd say it's probably Kimball, Becker, Jones, and you feel really good about Eli Jones on Sundays in this league, given the level of his production. But they're going to explore the portal because there's not a ton of options right now. They're high on Sam Simpson. You have a couple guys coming off Tommy John that are going to continue to knock the rust off. But starting quality pitchers, especially lefty pitchers, is going to be a very key piece that they're going to look to add through the transfer portal.
Yeah, no doubt about it. All right, so let's switch gears to men's basketball here. We've already kind of talked about projected starters, rotational guys, all the guys are in. Let's talk 2024 recruiting, but before we do that, it was announced that this team in August is going to go to the Bahamas for once every 5 years you get it. I think they're going to play teams from Lithuania and Argentina in the Bahamas. But when you have the number of new guys on a roster that Lamont Paris is going to have, and the fact that he's still, I kind of think, trying to find his footing in as being a Power 5 and being an SEC head coach. When you get all your guys away from all the distractions and everything, even before you start, your fall workouts, individual skill development, 3-on-3, etc., and then fall practice in October, it's kind of a jump start, I think, to try to build some chemistry, to be able to evaluate some guys, see where, there's areas of development and areas of strength for your guys, and try different combinations as well. Just your thoughts on the trip, and what, is it a big deal or not that big of a deal?
I mean, I think it's a huge deal. And when I say this, I'm not comparing the two teams by any stretch of any imagination. The 1997 South Carolina team, when you talk to those guys on the team that won the SEC and was a number 2 seed in the tournament, they talk a lot about, they took an overseas trip that year before the 97 season and said that was when we kind of got the bond, and you start to learn strengths and weaknesses and see who's a leader and see how you play together. And when you talk about that versus what South Carolina had to do last year, where Lamont Paris and his staff had 2 evaluation pieces outside of just practice to know what they had in guys. And it was a scrimmage against Charlotte, and it was an exhibition. I forget who they played, but it was Allen or Benedict. It was one of the smaller schools in South Carolina that Mars Hill. That's who it was, because it was Larry Davis's old team. Speaking of the 97 South Carolina team. But it was one of those situations where they didn't have a lot of time to evaluate, and now they do. Number one, the roster really wasn't set until middle of summer, so you don't have guys that are able to come in and gel. Now, when these guys come on campus a couple days ago, it's pretty much set, unless something crazy happens over the course of the next couple weeks. It's set. Now you're talking about getting that together, and then you get to go on the road together and bond and do all this stuff without the pressure of having to play a game that counts towards a record, without any of that stuff. And I think that that's a huge bonding experience for a team that needs to get close and kind of develop roles in the locker room in terms of leadership, but also an evaluation tool for who plays well together, who doesn't play as well together. What does this look like? Can we run this with this guy? And it's just a huge evaluation tool for this staff without the games, for lack of a better term, counting. Those don't go on a win-loss record, and you're able to go out there and just kind of tinker a little bit and see what guys do well. And so I think it's going to be big. If they go to the NCAA tournament this year, I don't think we're all going to be going, man, that Bahamas trip really sold it. But I do think that it's going to be a really, really quality evaluation tool for South Carolina to kind of figure out what they have and see just different things about this team is before you really start to amp up towards the season.
Collyn, do you think Ebo will be available to play on that trip? How is he coming in his recovery from the Achilles injury?
He was running on a court in whenever that Gamecock Gala was. So into April, I want to say he was back to running on a court. They've shared some photos of him shooting and doing some stuff in workouts. If he does play, I think it'll be very limited, just kind of up and down, a minute here, a minute there. But they're going to be really safe with him just because he was going to be such an integral part to last year and is going to be such an integral part to this year. They don't want to, would you rather have him for Virginia Tech and some of these big non-con games you have, or would you rather go ahead or have him get injured or re-aggravate something in a meaningless is not the right word, but as inconsequential as a game like this could be in August?
No doubt. So, Collyn, a few weeks ago, I think we were all hoping there was going to be one subtraction and one new addition to the men's roster. It didn't play out the way they hoped it would, which means the BBV will not be retiring. I don't really even have him in my rotation for this year. I think he's the 10th or 11th guy probably. And that means the only other guys below him are Morris, Ugatsuk, who is redshirting, and Conyers, who I think is a developmental guy all the way. I am very high on Collyn Murray-Boyles, and I do expect Stephen Clark to be a post-rotational guy. And B.J. Mack can play. I think South Carolina eventually will be better with him at the 5 than the 4. I don't know how well that will go with him, or how they could run the offense maybe through him as a 5, and Collyn Murray-Boyles maybe, or Stephen Clark at the 4. But I do expect this to be an improved team, but they still have holes, and they're going to lose more guys this coming year. They have got to have a great recruiting class. And so obviously the one guy, Cam Scott, at the top of the list, I think, for me. I mean, you do have Oku Federico, who I really like, already committed for 24. Who are the guys outside of Cam Scott, Kyle Green, and maybe Elijah Crawford? I don't know, how to go with him. Who are the guys, and the portal will continue to be a major tool. I think it has to be, right, for Paris. But who are some of the high school guys that could, potentially sign for 2024 before this team really plays a game?
Yeah, those are the 3 big ones. There's really not. I mean, they're showing interest in Darian Reed out of Augustus Grovetown. I think Darian Reed is focused on other schools right now outside of South Carolina, but they were initially in his recruitment. Cam Scott's the big one. KJ Green's the big one. Elijah Crawford, another guard prospect that they're really going after. And more names could pop up over the course of the next few weeks. I mean, you're talking about the Scholastic Live periods the next 2 weekends. You got Peach Jam at the beginning of July. So there are some things happening that you'll probably see some names surface, but those are the big ones. And then you'll start talking about the portal and any other guys that might pop up over the course of the next few weeks.
All right. So it's going to be, so back to baseball, give us 2 or 3 maybe names to watch for. No top secret guys, because I know there's 1 or 2 of those out there.
Yeah.
But guys that are known, who are, a couple of names to really pay attention to and how they could fit at South Carolina?
Yeah, I know Justin Lohr, an Xavier left-handed reliever, is one that, I think they've expressed some interest in. There's a couple others. I'm blanking on them right now. I should have my list in front of me, but Lohr's a big one. Had like a sub-2 ERA for the Musketeers, and they got to a regional final. I'm really high on Austin Brindling, the guy that's already committed in this class, who's a center fielder with an OBP of 500. But names should start to surface over the course of the next few weeks, really days. I mean, the portal's just like that. As you start to see guys really enter the portal and this thing starts to really, really, really take off.
All right, Collyn, tell us what you got coming up on GamecockCentral.com.
Yeah, so we'll have plenty recapping baseball and all of the fun that has come with that, and just kind of putting a bow on this season, looking ahead to the portal into next year. I'll have some stories with Collyn Murray-Boyles. I spoke with him about a week ago before he moved on campus, so we'll have some exclusive stuff from him coming up, I believe, tomorrow, and whatever the day after tomorrow is that Friday? We're losing track here.
I think it is.
And then obviously we'll be up doing some live period work and kind of handling recruiting on every front as South Carolina basketball and baseball specifically for me kind of reshape their roster and kind of gear towards what next season might look like.
So is there a relief pitcher at Virginia Tech that could be on the way for the Gamecocks?
I think there might be.
From a burgundy and orange bird to a garnet and black bird.
I would think so. I think that there is a guy that you could possibly see is coming to Columbia as a relief pitcher there, yes.
I mean, look, the chicken strut is much superior to the hokey pokey. So
Speaking
the
of
Chicken Strut home at Bethune, South Carolina, one of my former homes as a young coach when I had both hair and a hideous mustache, I must add, in hindsight.
They're
it was
as
cool
someone
in the early 90s, but not so much.
As someone that my mother is a huge Virginia Tech fan, her family grew up in Virginia. They do a turkey gobble at the stadium instead of like South Carolina has the rooster crow. They have a turkey gobble, which is absolutely hilarious. One of the coolest things in sports, just because it's so like if you explain that to anybody else outside of a college football world, they would have said that's the dumbest thing on the planet. But here we are.
Doubt. I think it was actually the Chitlin Strut in Bethune, the Chicken Strut someplace else. But at any rate, the music's really good. There's country on one side of town, and then back in the day, it was the really good hip hop in the early 90s.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Hey, Collyn, I can't thank you enough for being with us. We'll let you roll with that. Have a great Father's Day weekend, even though any news you want to, any breaking news on that front you want to add to the show?
Nothing yet. We'll see. We're going to let the guy make an announcement, and we'll see what happens. But maybe some portal movement over the course of the next few days, hours, weeks, all that fun stuff.
All right, Collyn. Thanks again. We'll look forward to catching up with you again real soon. Take
Absolutely.
care, my man.
Yep.
All right, that is Collyn Taylor from Gamecock Central, a Bud man and a Cubs fan, and the hardest working man at Gamecock Central. So, like I said, the Gamecock football roster almost set. Jacius Gear also in, along with the rest of your very good freshman class. I think you're going to see maybe even more of these guys that are coming in now potentially play than the guys that came in January. So that will be interesting. We'll probably chop that up tonight on the Garnet and Black Town Hall. J.C. Sherbert will pop in. He will be our guest to end the show, and then when we go to overtime, which is our unrecorded segment, where a lot of scoop gets dropped, I do think there will be at least two more additions to the Gamecock roster. One is a graduate transfer defensive end. And then there's that Burks guy, which we still don't know what's going on there. The NCAA, they may, in mid-November, they may approve his transfer back to South Carolina when he's 10 games in at Oregon. That would be their style. And then there's a guy I've talked about with connections to Spencer Rattler that I'm still hearing could be joining the roster at some point sooner rather than later. And then the Gamecocks continue to mine the transfer portal. There could be another offensive lineman out there. So, hey, come and join us. Patreon.com/GamecockPod Daily. Go to my Twitter page at KAllsep. Follow the show at GamecockPod. Go to the top of the home page, click the link. Now you can sign up for a 7-day free trial. So sign up today just for the Garnet and Black Town Hall. Even if you stay, I promise you one episode of that is worth a month's cost to subscribe. I mean, it's like one trip to Starbucks. J.C. Sherbert's going to be dropping knowledge. We'll have the official Gamecock schedule. By then, we will discuss that. And it's like going down to your favorite pub or sports bar, hanging out with your favorite friends and Gamecocks and talking about the team you love. So until tonight, This is Keith Allsep with special thanks to Collyn Taylor. This has been Gamecock Pod Live. I will say this is our last Gamecock Pod Live until July, as I'm going to be gone the next 2 weeks. I'm driving to South Carolina next Wednesday morning, so no show there. And then on Tuesday the 27th, I will be taking my daughter to her first Atlanta Braves game, and then we're driving back, and so we'll be on the road until late on Wednesday, and then we'll probably crank back up maybe after the 4th of July. So really appreciate everybody tuning in. And again, if you are not a subscriber, you can sign up, 7-day free trial, VIP tier, and you can join us for the Garnet and Black Town Hall tonight on Zoom. So until then, this is Keith Allsep saying, God bless. God bless our troops. Go Gamecocks. And I am out of here.